Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on community solutions to empty homes. My name is Sharon Dean, and I'm the engagement manager in the Chartered of Institute Housing in the Cardiff office. I'll be facilitating today. Also is my colleague Sarah, who's from the Coventry office. She will be dealing with any queries you have. I'm just going to go through a short presentation just to familiarise yourself with the package we have running today. So the webinar will run for 60 minutes. It will be recorded, and a copy of the recording and a copy of the presentation will be sent to you a couple of days after the webinar. I'm speaking at the moment. If you have any issues regarding the screen, if you can't see us or hear us, if you just put your hand up or put a question in the question box, my colleague Sarah will then reply to you as soon as she can. If you've got a panel at the right hand of the screen, if you click the orange button, this will move the panel from your view, and then when you're ready for it to come back, if you just click the button and it'll come back into the view for you. If you have any questions or any comments throughout the webinar, if you use the question box, these will then come to myself and Sarah. We will then answer them for you so you know they've been received, and then the chair of the session we'll put them to the panel at the end of the presentations. We do have poll questions today, so if you get your poll question on the screen, if you exit full mode, this should then give you the capability to answer the poll questions. If you can't, for any reason, just put your answers in the question box and that would be fine. So that's the end of my presentation. The chair of today's session is Matthew Kennedy, and he is the policy advisor in the Cardiff office. I will now put you through to Matt. So good luck, everyone. Obviously, we are working from home, and if there's any Wi-Fi issues, we'll try and resolve them as soon as possible. But I'll now put you through to Matt. Thank you, Matt.
Hi, everyone. Thanks very much, Sharon. And a really good afternoon, a really warm welcome to the session on community-led solutions to addressing empty homes. It's a really exciting day today because we're launching this piece of research. I'll give you a little bit of a background as to how it first came about, and then we'll go straight in. We'll have a quick word by Mark Fury from Cardiff Met, and then we'll go straight into the presentation following that. So this piece of work came about as a result of us looking at an inquiry at the Welsh Parliament last year, focused on empty properties, and one of the things that inquiry came out with was that there needed to be a stronger focus on enabling local authorities and their partners to look at providing more community-led approaches to addressing empty homes. So through our Tyfu Tai Cymru project, and if you haven't heard of TTC before, it's basically our policy and analysis project in Wales. So myself and my colleague Catherine May work on that project, and we look at sort of gaps in evidence and how we can provide some useful insight to progress housing policy. And obviously, this was identified as a real kind of gap, an area where we could progress and provide some evidence. So we are absolutely delighted to work with 3 final year housing studies students at Cardiff Met University who gave up their summer. So Emma, Anthony and Amy worked with us over the summer and supported by the Wales Cooperative Centre to produce this excellent piece of work. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass over to Mark. Mark's their lecturer. He's going to say a few words before the guys begin their presentation.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Hi, everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome to the webinar. So, as Matt said, I'm Mark Fury. I'm a lecturer on the Housing Studies degree programme at Cardiff Met University. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to talk to you before I hand over to the research team. And just to start by saying that at Cardiff Met, we are extremely proud of our students' achievements, both during their studies and after they've graduated. And today we're going to hear from 3 of our final students, as Matt has already told you, Emma, Anthony and Amy, who have undertaken a fantastic piece of research over the summer. We're also really proud of our connections with the housing sector and with our colleagues at Chartered Institute Housing and Tyfu Tai. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank Matt and Catherine from Tyfu Tai for providing this opportunity for the team to be able to undertake this research, and thank to everyone who participated in the research too, from local authorities and housing associations from across Wales. Without you, this research would not have been possible. So sincere thank you for getting involved. During their degree, housing studies students explore many aspects of housing policy and practice, and they also develop their research skills to fully prepare them for the future. And often a common thread amongst our students is the passion to make a difference to people's lives and the communities they live in. Throughout this August, Emma, Anthony and Amy were offered the opportunity to work in partnership with Tyfu Tai to undertake a research project looking into the issues of empty homes in Wales and the impact that community-led housing solutions can have on addressing this issue. This was a fantastic opportunity for them to put their knowledge and research skills to the test and potentially influence decision-making in housing going forward. And it's fair to say that this was an opportunity that the 3 students grabbed with both hands. Before handing over to the research team, I just wanted to briefly talk to you about the research and to highlight the research aims, which are to understand the current challenges of bringing empty homes back into use, to understand current approaches to reducing empty homes undertaken by local authorities, and the third aim is to identify any learning that can be taken from housing organisations that have adopted a community-led housing solutions approach to bringing empty homes back into use. And I just want to briefly mention the methodology too. So the research methods that were adopted by the team were a series of semi-structured interviews held on Microsoft Teams with a number of local authority and housing association staff from across Wales. In addition to this, a number of community-led housing practice examples were also analysed and presented, and they can be found in the appendices of the research report, and they're presented as case studies. What I really like about this research is how Emma, Anthony and Amy have captured the views and experiences of people who are working in the sector in order to gain a better understanding of the current approaches to and the challenges of bringing empty homes back into use. I also really like the way they've captured the learning from housing organisations who are either planning to or have undertaken community-led approaches to addressing the issue of empty homes. So I know that the research team have a lot of information to give you. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Emma Parcell, Anthony Morgans and Amy McMurray. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. So we'll just crack on with it. So change the slide. So despite the tools currently available to local authorities in addressing the issue of empty homes in their area, they have had a limited amount of success in addressing and reducing empty homes. The current global pandemic, with its national and regional lockdowns, has only exaggerated the urgent need for everyone to have suitable and safe homes. The empty homes are a wasted resource, and these should be seen as a valuable resource which can be used to improve the lives of communities. Our research set out to understand the role community-led housing solutions could play in overcoming some of the barriers to bringing empty homes back into use. So for clarity, community-led housing is defined as any housing scheme involving communities that are taking a role in providing housing solutions for people in need. In order for us to understand the role of community-led housing solutions in addressing empty homes, we first needed to understand what the challenges were. We also needed to understand what current approaches local authorities were undertaking, and we were very keen that the research was about what we could learn and what could be shared with others as good practice examples from housing associations who have adopted community-led housing solutions. So as Mark's already said, we used a mixed methods approach. We conducted semi-structured virtual interviews with participants both online and on the telephone, as requested by participants. We carried out secondary research looking at practice examples of community-led housing to complement our research and enable them to be used as a tool for learning. We were very keen to capture the participants' experiences and use qualitative measure methods to highlight the responses and perspectives of participants. We also conducted a thematic review to capture the themes from the responses. We were keen to speak to housing associations and local authorities across Wales in order to get a balanced view of the challenges and approaches. And we did initially aim to speak to 4 local authorities and 4 housing associations. We actually had 7 local authorities and 2 housing associations agreed to participate in the research, which we're really thankful for. Of the 2 housing associations, one had adopted a community-led response in addressing empty homes, whereas the other has adopted community-led housing solutions, although not currently to address the issue of empty homes. However, they do have plans to develop this in the future. To complement the Housing Association responses, case studies have been included in the appendix as good practice examples of community-led housing solutions. So here are the perspectives of the local authority participants. When we were looking at current approaches, there was inconsistencies amongst local authority responses regarding the use of enforcement. Enforced sale is actively used by some respondents as it's a quicker and simpler process to undertake. Empty dwelling management orders are seen as a drain on the limited resources and are very labour intensive due to the processes the local authorities must follow. There was acknowledgement from some local authorities that they were not proactive in carrying out enforcement. This again adds to the variation of responses to addressing empty homes. There's currently no empty home strategy and no statutory duty for local authorities to publish empty home strategies. They do have a requirement to publish housing strategies, and there may be a reference of empty homes within that. This again leads to inconsistencies in approaches. Council tax records are used to identify empty properties. However, apart from using data to communicate with the owners, the data must not interfere with a person's right to privacy and cannot be disclosed to third parties, which limits the usefulness of the information. Respondents acknowledge the funding they received from Welsh Government. However, there was concern that the funding runs out within a few months and that the very strict conditions make it difficult for owners of empty properties to access the funding. Local authorities discussed how difficult it was to offer new initiatives with the limited funding available, and some stated they were seeking alternative funding streams to access further funding. Next, we looked at the barriers. The barriers included the need for more human resources, as respondents highlighted they did not have the staff to be able to be proactive, and instead tended to be reactive in their response to the short-term impact of empty homes. There was also a call for further human resources with legal expertise and training to improve confidence and to assist staff in making decisions about how to deal with the empty homes, which would make the local authority response more efficient. The barriers and the local authority responses were reliant on the location of the empty homes, with those in rural locations usually singular properties with limited accessibility by public transport, as they were not on a bus route and not financially viable for refurbishment. These properties would be difficult to rent or sell. Loans and grants are for refurbishment work, which if not financially viable limits the opportunities to bring empty homes back into use. Urban local authorities can access and benefit from the Welsh Government's current drive for city centre regeneration for singular or clusters of empty homes. Obviously, COVID has had a big impact, and COVID has created further barriers for 73%. So respondents told us the barriers include the Welsh Government commissioned training with Andrew Lavender, who's considered an expert in the field of empty homes, has been postponed. They're now taking less enforcement action. All work is currently being triaged. They've been prevented from being able to undertake planned community engagement due to not being able to go out. Additional needs have been taken priority, and they're unable to make decisions on grant funding applications due to not being able to visit the properties. 27% highlighted, though, that COVID has created opportunities for them. They've been able to reflect and consider their current approaches. They also found they were better able to contact some empty homeowners. I'll now pass you on to Amy.
Thank you. So the chart shows the respondents' suggestions of possible solutions in respect of the barriers. So these focus on more human resources, less restrictions, Welsh Government to commission training, a joined-up approach, less labour intensive, and more grants. So there was a call for more funding for dedicated human resources, as the quotes illustrate. There were inconsistencies between the resources available to participants.
Sorry, Emma, are you still sharing your screen?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I got it on now, sorry.
That's okay, no worries. Let me just send it to you again, just in case. That should be coming up. Do you want to X out them and then I'll try and get it back to you? If not, I can
Okay.
show this for you myself.
Can't get to it.
Do you want to carry on, Amy? And we'll get the presentation up in the background for everyone else.
Okay. So the respondents told us that grants run out quickly. They find the process is quite restrictive and complicated and call for a simplified process, as funding is a barrier for them. There are calls for quicker mechanisms to release money owed to local authorities from charges on properties. Respondents also told us that they welcome the Welsh Government Commission training as part of their drive on reducing empty homes. However, there were calls for a centralised legal support team that local authorities can go to when they need advice and support. 86% had no experience of community-led housing solutions, so those who do have are not only just beginning to speak to the community about the current approaches and seek community-led housing solutions. Respondents were, however, keen to understand more about community-led housing solutions. 63% felt community-led housing solutions could be effective as a way of addressing empty homes. There was, however, concerns from 32% of participants. So here are some of the quotes. So it definitely can be a solution and it should be part of the package. Engaging in local people will raise the profile, which is a benefit. Some of these quotes represent some of the concerns, which is not particularly effective on a large scale, will never be a driver behind all empty homes because it got to come from that group. So next we asked about whether they could suggest anything that would support the creation of opportunities for additional community-led housing solutions. Resources were an issue and participants felt that they would need additional resources to enable them to provide additional community-led solutions. Inconsistencies with how local authorities prioritise empty homes was clear here, with respondents suggesting that they would need a joined-up approach to make it work. So we asked the housing association participants about what community-led housing solutions they have adopted to reduce empty homes. So Housing Association 1, they have experience of community-led housing, and they said we worked with the local authority to look at different options for the block. They were completely unlettable at the time. It's a really good bit of partnership working. They offered lots of training and support to the tenants in the beginning because they had no experience of co-ops. It was a fantastic project and they're 4 years on and now it's a fully mutual cooperative. So the Housing Association 2 had no experience of community-led housing. So they said it's a bit of a rough time in terms of this, as the plans they did have kind of gone out the window with the pandemic. They have around 300 to 400 empty properties, which are basically beyond economical repair. In terms of community-led initiatives in trying to get empty homes full, it's not something that they have done so much as a focus previously. It's very much something that they want to do. So now I will pass you on to Anthony.
Thank you, Amy. So this brings us on to local authority partnerships. The partnerships, well, the partnership working enabled the Housing Association to adopt a community-led housing solution to address the issues of empty properties. The partnership was key as the local authority provided a low-cost long-term loan and the cooperative pay a lease agreement which covers the loan costs. The partnership working minimises the risk to the Housing Association in adopting this approach and allows the housing associations to have conversations with the local authorities to discuss creating opportunities for further community-led housing solutions. The most effective aspects of community-led housing solutions, the respondents felt, were it has created a very close-knit community with high support needs who needed support to attend meetings, now fully involved and have a strong support network. Tenants really look after the properties. This results in low repair costs. Increased tenancy sustainability, with a high performance model that has a very low void turnaround rate of just 1 day as the tenants let the properties themselves. No rent increase for 4 years as tenants take on the management of the building. This brings us to the learning. The Housing Association, who adopted a community-led approach, offered suggestions and lessons that can be learnt and can be shared as good practice examples for those considering adopting the approach. These were set up as standalone organisations. Members do have full control. Takes a lot of time and resource. Setting up a similar governance structure as housing associations did not work, so they did change it slightly. It needs to be flexible around people's busy lives, be understanding and listen, and set clear expectations of tenants and organisations at the beginning. This takes us to the case studies that have been included within the report. They highlight the benefits of community-led housing solutions when bringing empty homes back into use. These could be used as a guide and to share good practice examples to enhance the learning of opportunities. Main themes that came from the research was local authority participants felt funding was a barrier. However, the Housing Association, who has adopted a community-led approach, felt they were enabled by the local authority. There were inconsistencies with human resources. Although many local authorities did have an empty homes officer, there were some who did not. Some were single officers, whilst some had empty homes teams. The responses highlighted that the current processes and funding restrictions make it very labour intensive, often with little or no results. Empty property data is reported and compared between local authorities with respondents, indicating that they target properties that will produce results. Local authorities are working on a reactive basis to reduce the proactive interventions that they can use. There is much learning that can be taken from the Housing Association that has implemented this model, and the learning could contribute to resource savings in the future. Again, inconsistencies regarding the use of enforcement. Enforced sale is seen as a quicker and simpler approach than empty dwelling management orders, which are viewed as a drain on a limited resource. Council tax premium, when used, can prompt action by empty homeowners. Some respondents acknowledged that they were not proactive in carrying out enforcement, which adds to the variation of local authority responses to address empty homes within their area. Location. Local authorities in rural areas found singular empty properties which are not accessible by public transport or not financially viable to refurbish, difficult to rent or sell. Urban local authorities are able to unlock housing potential and bring empty homes back into use by utilising the resources of the Welsh Government's current drive for city centre regeneration. This brings us to our recommendation. So we did ask for the following recommendations to be considered to maximise the benefits of community-led housing solutions, bring empty homes back into use. One was the Welsh Government to place an emphasis on community-led approaches as a strand within its forthcoming National Empty Homes Action Plan to detail the resources available to help grow the approach. Local authorities published their empty home strategy, detailing activities aimed at increasing use of community-led approaches. Welsh Government to commission and roll out training available to all staff to focus on empty homes, bringing empty homes back into use. Welsh Government to host a seminar each year to focus on sharing learning from projects that have used community-led approaches to bring empty homes back into use. And finally, local authorities to develop a common framework for reviewing and improving how opportunities for communities can act in partnership to address empty homes are communicated at a local level. This brings us to the end of the presentation, and thank you all for your attention.
Fab, thank you very much, guys. Can I just get Amy and Emma back on the screen, if that's okay? And so we'll just go into a bit of actually, no, we won't go into Q&A, sorry, I'm going to head myself. We're going to run 3 poll questions, just to get a sense. I can see on the screen attendees from all over the place, which is fantastic. So it'd be fab to get a bit of a sense of how the audience feels about this here. So we have 3 poll questions we'd like to run, if that's okay. If I can ask Sharon to initiate those now. So the first question is, how effective do you think your organisation is at finding solutions to empty homes? So you'll see the options there: very, some, or not at all. So voting is now open, so feel free to cast your vote. So I can see the results come in live, which is exciting. We've got about 70% for some, 20% for very, and 10% for not at all, which is probably a good news story overall. A couple more coming in, not changed it too much. So there we go. So we've ended up on about 71% some, 14% on very, and 14% not at all. So overall, a really good, I think, level of confidence among people listening in. So if we roll on to the next question, please, Sharon. So the next question is, to what extent do you think repurposing empty homes would overcome housing shortages in Wales? So again, very, some, or not at all. Let's see what people think about that. So there's already really, really strong support for very. So clearly, people listening in feel like this could be something which could help meet housing need in a really meaningful way. No people saying not at all. So 86% think very, 14% think some, and then 0 for not at all. So again, a really good vote of confidence that this is the kind of thing we should be doing more of. And obviously empty properties, I think we can all agree, an absolute blight in themselves, and some which could go a long way towards meeting immediate and long-term housing need too. So then the final poll question, if that's all right. So how much do you feel you know about community solutions to housing problems? So again, the usual scale: very, some, or not at all. So this is a good measure of people's level of knowledge or confidence in this kind of particular focus we have around community-led solutions. So again, we've got quite about 68% saying some. So 23% think not at all. So that's gone to 26. So about a quarter of the audience probably need a bit more information on this area. 8% very, so a few experts within the audience too, which is really encouraging. But again, I think you guys can say more about this probably as we go into the Q&A, but I'm right in saying that one of the things that came through loud and clear in the research was that there was a need for more expertise, more sharing of learning to professionals working in quite a wide variety of kind of aspects of this work. Cool, thanks very much, Sharon, that's fab. So we're just going to roll into a really informal Q&A session, and apologies if people can't contribute directly, but there is, as Sharon said at the start, there's a questions box. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to pop them in there, and I'll make sure they get asked to the panel. So I'm going to kick off, if that's okay, whilst you guys think about what you'd like to ask. So firstly, I think it's really interesting finding, and I don't think we should make this entire conversation on COVID, but obviously it's timely and massive pressure and topic within the sector at the moment. And obviously the findings I found that that's placing a lot of pressure on local authorities and having an impact on things like empty homes. What do you think are some of the sort of key learning around some of that stuff? Who wants to kick off? Go on, Anthony.
Right. Me? Which one was it, sorry? Can you repeat the question?
So
I was listening.
That's okay. So the research came up with stuff around COVID and the impact it's having on local authorities, focusing on empty properties. What kind of stuff came up in the research that added a bit of kind of narrative around that for you?
Suppose the fact that obviously due to COVID they can't really engage with the community like they would have. Funding has come up like all the way through it really. Resources again is time consuming. Trying to implement everything as well. However, it can work as a positive time then to implement things with the COVID. So it has worked both ways, really. But obviously you can't engage like you would previous to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that chimes really strongly with kind of conversation we've had with local authority colleagues, many of whom had to change the emphasis of their roles, going away maybe from what would have been their day-to-day activities, looking at really kind of focusing in, supporting other teams in kind of a COVID context. And it came out strongly for me in the research was the fact that things like enforcement, what might be quite a typically under-resourced activity anyway, even more so at the moment. And when we think about kind of how important it is that empty homes are kind of made the most of in normal time, but even more so when we have a global pandemic, I mean that kind of consequence is really significant. I think from Emma and Amy, we have had one question in, so feel free to reflect on that first one. But so the first question, if I can open them. Sorry, Sharon, I don't know if you can get access to the questions yourself. My screen is not quite cooperating with me. So I don't know if you're able to ask one of the questions and just highlight what exactly it's saying. I can see part of it. You mentioned that a number of.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sharon. So
that's okay. If you just click the square box, Matt, it'll come to the middle of your screen and it'll be bigger for you.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much. So you mentioned that a number of local authorities have outlined. Oh, sorry, that is the same question I just asked. Hang on. I'm not doing a great job of chairing the session. So how will you carry on with your engagement with the Welsh Government moving forward with your recommendations? I know we've lost Amy from the screen, but Amy, I don't know if you can still hear me, so feel free to chip in as well. Emma, do you want to kick off with that one?
Yeah, I didn't answer the last one because I have problems getting back onto the screen. Sorry, I did find out that you guys could see me, but I couldn't see that I was there, so sorry.
No worries.
We had a meeting last week with Welsh Government officials, so obviously we give them a bit of a sneak preview of the report, and we had some positive things that they were talking to us about. I think it's just a case of waiting for the formal acceptances or rejections from the Welsh Government, and just keeping on top and seeing what can be done and how they're going to do it. Make sure I think the things we ask for are manageable. I think it's important we didn't say we want the moon because we'd never get it. I think just we've done this research, but it's not the end.
Yeah,
we just
absolutely.
need to keep on top with it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've written to the Minister a couple of days back, so hopefully we'll get some formal responses to those particular recommendations. But I think absolutely right. Considering we've got an election on the horizon, changing government, or another thing comes with that, work of this kind and kind of using evidence of this kind sort of need to span that time and beyond, really. So we've had another question in. Let's have a look. I see that. So, is there dedicated government funding available for bringing empty homes back into use? And I think you guys have reflected really well on some of the kind of key sources of revenue within the research. Do you want to say anything else about that area?
Yeah, I mean, there's grants and loans that they can obtain, and on like the scenario really. Like the one that was in the report, obviously they partnerships with the local authority, but it became a low-cost loan, so which obviously then they all managed themselves. It became fully really, because they were all fully engaged with it, full members, so forth. It does depend on the scenario as well. But I mean, there are options out there for people.
Yeah, definitely.
I think,
sorry, go on.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think, and they can still access the usual funding, but being community, community-led solutions and things, they've got access to additional funding as well. So, they could go to the Wales Co-op Centre or, private funding even. They're not just as restricted to just the empty homes funding. So I think they've also got a lot of benefits.
Absolutely. I think that ties in nicely to the stuff around staff as well, doesn't it? Because you can have all the the revenue streams, the incentives you want, but unless you've got the research kind of highlights the fact that some local authorities have empty properties officers or people with that significant role within teams. Others don't necessarily, and having that person there to help coordinate and deliver things in practice is probably really valuable.
Yeah.
Did you want to come in with anything? No, you good?
Sorry.
So the next question. So it isn't just about the repurposed properties, but the fact it allows movement within the housing market. That's a really good point. It also adds to the local community. Is there also consideration of the derelict high streets that have already historical transport links and infrastructure, etc., in place? That's a really good question. So I don't know if you guys want to reflect a bit on that.
Yeah, I think, like our report highlighted, location was a big barrier. It depended where the house was and everything else. And obviously with COVID now, there's going to be a lot more empty properties, whether they're offices or whatever. So I think, the Welsh Government have got a drive on there on the city centre regeneration. So I think this could be pushed in, not pushed in, but squeezed in a bit to put a bit of a drive on it to say, well, we've got these properties, get the community involved, and what can we use it for? There's no point having loads of empty properties everywhere and loads of people needing homes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a big part, that's how you market that opportunity to the public, isn't it? How do people know? Like, how do we find out more about how we can play an active role in our communities to have that kind of effect on buildings that have been vacant, both within urban areas, but also within kind of like our high streets, because absolutely right. One of the things we often talk about in housing generally is that link to the infrastructure which help communities to thrive. Unless you have that in place, no matter how good your housing, people's prospects and their ability to live a good life will be heavily impacted by what's around them. So I think a really good point when we kind of think about how some of our high streets within our smaller towns outside of the larger cities, in particular in Wales, might be suffering at the moment, and will now no doubt find things more difficult as we go. And I think that's absolutely right about that link with office blocks and the impact of COVID going forward. So I think really good kind of reflection to make at least. And anything on that in particular?
No, but obviously, by the time we've done the research, there wasn't really the offices and so forth that were empty at the time. I mean, it was in the summer, so COVID was obviously an issue, but it wasn't as prominent as it is now as regards offices, because people just aren't returning to offices and so forth. Now it's just mainly centred around local authorities and like empty homes within areas. So, but yeah, they do need to look into how they're going to approach it, I think. Pointless having them empty, and people do need homes, and obviously they're trying to get homeless off the streets and so forth.
That sounds like an idea for more research, doesn't it? Right there.
Yeah, I would say something that really came across as well was a lot of the local authorities that we spoke to wasn't really sure what community-led housing solutions were. So obviously if they didn't understand it, then they can't really promote it. And if people don't know it's an opportunity, then they've got no chance of selling it on to people either.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair point. So moving on there, so why do you think enforcement doesn't work, or why hasn't it been as successful as it might have been in reducing the net amount? Obviously it has reduced the overall amount. We haven't seen massive movement in that net amount of the last sort of decade or so.
Yeah, I think definitely, it's inconsistencies again. Some local authorities do proactively do enforcement, whereas others say that, you know, that they're not able to do it. It's definitely down to resources. You know, if they don't have a fully committed team to work on it, or somebody is working on it, but then they're being dragged from one area to another area or something else. And I think because there's a lot of the empty dwelling management orders, they take so long. So, you know, if they keep going through the processes and then get knocked back, if they haven't got much resources or much time, you know, they'll steer clear of them and try and get the stuff that, you know, they think they can get results on, because obviously they are being compared when they do the annual reports and things, is comparisons, so they need to show results. But I think it's definitely, you know, it's just, you know, inconsistencies and not enough of priority maybe.
Yeah.
Obviously that's my views, and it might not be the views of everybody.
Yeah, that seems fair enough, I think, and I think you hit the nail on the head with things like, you know, EDMOs and some of that enforcement stuff where local authorities carry a lot of risk in terms of the amount of work they've got to put in when it gets formalised and taken forward, but also the amount of money behind things too. And if authorities can't be more certain about getting a result, then it's difficult to make a robust financial case for taking forward enforcement actions in some instances. But definitely for me, that's why things like community-led approaches offer another way, don't they, an alternative way that actually has loads of really good benefits for the community as a great bonus. Obviously, it doesn't necessarily involve the kind of risk that other kinds of enforcement action might involve. So I've got another questions coming in thick and fast now, so let's move on to another one. So is council tax premium meant to be a significant enough amount to cause owners to make an effort in repurposing empty homes / buildings? I know you didn't focus.
What came across for us when we were talking about it was not all local authorities enforce it anyway.
Yeah.
The ones who did say that they did use it, once they got in touch with the owners, it did prompt them to either pay up or, you know, do something with their home. So it can be a good thing. But I think, you know, if people are like accidental owners or things like that, putting the premium on them, they maybe can't afford it anyway, but they may be not ready yet to work on things, you know, because empty homes is over 6 months. It can take you 2 years to sell your house. We're still included in the figures as well. So, you know, I think you've got to have a bit of give and take a bit, you know.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think we always forget that sometimes that empty homes are a long-term project. In many cases, it isn't a case of a few months and we'll see a big change in the figures. This is you know, looking a few years. So particularly with some of our hardest to bring back into use homes, potentially needing significant refurbishment over the course of a few years. I think it's a really good point. And I think one thing that was really clear from the Welsh Parliament's work last year was that sometimes, even though authorities have got this power, it's about using the revenue brought in from things like council tax premiums to put back in to bring the empty homes back into use, which isn't always the case. So definitely using that mechanism to reinvest in how authorities address the problem locally. So again, for me, that would be a really kind of significant thing to do more of. Anything on that at all, Anthony?
No, pretty much what Em said, really. I mean, they can use it. They can use a higher premium as well if they will. I think you can go up. I can't remember what they said now. I'd have to go back onto it, but it was a significant amount. But I mean, like Em said, if it's only been empty for 6 months, always waiting to be sold, then how can you justify billing them, you know, when they're trying to sell it? And it could be that someone can afford to repair the property. So, yeah, pretty much.
A good hook, isn't it, for getting people engaging and communicating with them about their home, where you know authorities sometimes find it difficult to find owners and get that level of engagement needed to progress the conversation.
I suppose like they would know then why it's empty as well, like the local authorities. If they do use it, they could find out why it's just vacant, you know. So it does weigh up, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. So did local authorities report any issues around resident engagement and building up participation and interest in community housing projects? So what was that kind of, what was your sense of what that engagement was like?
For the ones who were considering it, you know, they were starting to speak to the communities, but a lot of what we felt anyway was the local authorities thought it should be the communities coming to them and they'll support them, whereas obviously if they don't know that that support's available, nobody's going to come to them, so nothing's going to get done. So I think it needs to be a bit of like a two-way street, you know, people in the communities having ideas, but knowing they could go to the council and see what support they could have as well.
Yeah, I think it's really important, isn't it? We recognise we should make assumptions about what people maybe don't want to do, and actually, if given the right information and advice, there could be really powerful opportunities just on our doorstep. That came out really strongly in some of the comments about people, you know, professionals wanting to know more about how to do it in practice and what kinds of things, you know, tangible things would they need to do to engage communities on this issue in particular.
Yeah, definitely.
So in the research, you highlight kind of barriers in rural areas. Do you see a role for rural housing enablers in supporting to bring empty properties back into use?
The rural local authorities that we did speak to are actually working with the rural housing enabler at the moment, and they were setting up like you know, community engagement sessions and things, but obviously due to COVID, they weren't able to carry on. So they are looking to continue with it, but it's on hold at the moment. But yeah, I think there's definitely a role there.
Yeah, what strikes me that thing on infrastructure as well, where you've got more rural communities and homes that aren't necessarily linked into kind of, you know, populated centres like towns and stuff, and that sort of thing, where bringing them back into use is more than just the house, but actually how do you make sure people have, you know, sufficient links to things like travel, education, healthcare, that sort of stuff too. Sorry, Anne, did you want to come in?
No, I was just going to say that some of them said like really rural areas where there's no transport links. There's, you know, the bus every hour, possibly. It was like, how is that going to be financially viable? Because they can't let them. You know, it just wasn't that viable when they suggested it at the time. But I mean, I suppose then you'd have to look into like the transport link and then, you know, how that could possibly link bringing it into the centre. Yeah. I
think it's a good point now about looking at, you know, doing this activity in isolation. It's about, you know, the measures bringing homes back into use is about making sure there's everything else kind of around the home which makes a difference to people's lives, isn't it? So do you think could additional funding, or I guess opportunities even, come through the green agenda, so the push towards greener, more sustainable housing?
Yeah, sustainable.
Yeah, I would think there's definitely opportunities to explore that further. I mean, I will be honest, I don't know 100% about, you know, that whole initiative, but I think it's definitely is opportunities there.
Yeah, definitely. So
yeah.
Sorry, Hanson, go on.
No, I was going to say that, you know, agree with Emma. There's definitely opportunities there, and possibly like with the rural, because they do electric farms and so forth. So, you know, sustainably they could get. Obviously they're on about doing the metro in Cardiff and so forth. That's supposed to be electric. The kids.
Yeah, definitely. I think that there's so much out there at the moment, isn't there, about pushing towards you know, greener, more sustainable housing, both, and probably the emphasis more on our new homes, what we're building new, but it's so important not to forget we have, you know, a significant amount of the homes we'll be living in 50 years' time currently built already. You know, we do need to look at things like retrofitting and that sort of stuff, but obviously with empty properties there's a real opportunity, because, you know, they are empty, to do significant renovation and make sure those houses are already have those kind of green measures in place where they're possible to incorporate. So I think there's definitely something there, isn't it? Because it feels like funding follows things like this, where there's demand to see more from a, I can hear my dog in the background sadly, but hopefully it doesn't interrupt too much. Where there's just more of a push towards this kind of policy area, and that feels like it's definitely coming out really strongly in Welsh Government's kind of own narrative, isn't it? So how big is the empty homes problem, which I think is a really good question. How many are there in Wales? So what impact on the housing crisis would bringing all homes back into use have? That's a big question.
Yeah,
That is a big one.
There's 27,000 empty homes in Wales. They're in the private sector, and there's 1,400 socially rented homes, which are long-term empty voids. So if they were all utilised, now obviously we're not going to get all of them, but even if you've got half of them, that's a big chunk of the housing crisis covered. And obviously it's quicker and easier to sort out homes like here than building more. We still need to build more, but we've got these homes here, we need to be using them.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if I answered all them bits of the question, but I got bits.
Go on,
Anne. Yeah, don't ask me the figures because I just not very good at figures at all. Emma and Amy are really good with figures. But yeah, I mean, it would help with the housing crisis, to be fair. Thing is, though, you don't know with the figures, like for the local authority, you don't know like if they've only been vacant for 6 months or whether it's been a year or longer. You would need to look into that further. Yeah, definitely would help the housing crisis. And there's nothing to turn them around really and rent them and so forth.
I think one of the things the committee found last year was exactly that. So the data, or we need more richer data about those homes, not just about number, but about the nature of them, why they're empty, understanding some of the stuff behind this too, both at a local and national level. And for me, it's always, I think, stark that we get those numbers often from things like council tax, where if there are homes in very serious disrepair, they won't be included in those figures anyway. So some of our homes which are hardest to bring into use will not even be within that number. So the truth is we don't know the exact figure, which I think is probably the start of our issue. And not that it all depends on that, but it definitely is a good kind of starting point to have the evidence base.
Sorry, Matt, I'll jump in quick.
Go on.
I think it's important as well, if we're going to be looking at, changing it from the numbers and experiences, finding out from the communities what their experiences of having the empty homes there.
Yeah.
Because there could be, there's 4 empty homes, and there's 3 members of that community that really want to stay in the community and things. So you can link it up a bit more as well if it's not numbers.
I think that's a really good point, and particularly in like rural communities where there's often that narrative about younger people leaving rural communities for work, employment, that sort of stuff, and housing is one of those drivers. So actually understanding how we can do more with homes in those communities to better meet local housing needs is obviously a really positive thing. And completely right, we shouldn't just focus on the numbers either. Actually, there's people's experiences behind that, community experiences, which we can really draw and learn from. So do you think government should intervene by taking over and developing the properties and charging costs the owner once sold, or supply finance for owners to repay over time from rental income? So what do you think about that? Maybe,
if they've been trying to contact them and they're getting no engagement and things, I think that's probably like the enforced sale and going down that sort of route. But I think it's got to be that if they've taken the money, they need to have a quicker mechanism, because that's what we found out. Like if there's a charge on a property and then it gets sold later on down the line, it takes so long for the local authorities to get the money. So they've paid that money out, but they're not getting it for 5 years or 10 years or something.
Yeah.
So I think it needs to be a simplified process that's quick, that they can actually deal with if that was going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important, isn't it, when local authorities are dealing with so many things, and people working in this area are probably responsible for a number of different things, not just empty properties having a simplified way of applying for finance and having really clear terms attached to that, but also certainty going forward is definitely the thing to go with, isn't it? And do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I suppose it's basically what Em said, but I suppose it depends why they're empty in the first place. They don't get, it is difficult apparently to get so if they've had to, if it's empty and they've had to go in and get the lawn because of rat problems and so forth, difficult then to get the charges back, and this is where you get the whole legal side. And so I suppose a bit more funding from the government wouldn't hurt. And then, you know, but it does need to be looked into why they're empty in the first place. Are they derelict, or are they just been, someone's just gone away for a few months and, you know, lucky them, but, you know, it could be that they've just gone away for a few months for whatever reason. Is it actually empty, or is it they've just got somewhere else to go?
Yeah,
so you've just got to look at it always, really.
Yeah. We have got a hand up from Janet. So
Hey,
Janet, can I bring you? Can I bring you onto the screen, and you can ask your question direct to Emma and Anthony. I think Sharon's just working in the background to do that. I can see Janet's actually typed a question in, so I'll ask on your behalf, that's okay. So do you think, due to resourcing, that local authorities will always be reactive? So doing works in default relies on a charge on a property, and are some cash-strapped authorities reluctant to do this? Good question.
I think definitely with the resources and the funding that they've got at the moment, and because it's not, you know, they haven't got a full team working on it. You know, not many local authorities have got dedicated people, you know, full time on it. I think at the moment it definitely would stay reactive. I think if they had more resources and more funding, then they could be able to go proactive. But at the moment, I think they're restricted, so they have to be reactive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
We've absolutely flown through the time, and you guys have been excellent answering a load of questions. I've got to admit, it's been pretty fast paced. But I've got to say a massive thank you to you both. There's a couple of just comments I want to read out. One reflecting on the work, so strikes me that a lot more joined up thinking is required politically. I think, you know, who could disagree with that? And a final, well done to all involved. Look forward to hearing back from Welsh Government feedback. I go say a massive thank you to Emma, Anthony and Amy, because you guys have kind of gone off and taken this work and just gone and done it, which has been absolutely fantastic. And also with support from Casey from the Wales Co-op Centre, Mark, obviously your support from a Cardiff Met perspective. I think it's been a fantastic piece of work and one we're really, really proud to put our name to. And I'm sure the three of you will be names we see in and around the sector in one way, shape or form in a really positive way going forward. So a really, really big thank you. I'm just going to hand over to Sharon, who will kind of close the session down. But a really big thank you to everyone who kind of gave them questions. We've had lots of really good, high quality questions. Don't forget, you can listen to the session back afterwards anyway. So any colleagues who've missed out, or if you've missed bits of it, feel free to listen back afterwards. But thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. So again, just to say thank you to all the speakers. You've done excellent. I know you were a little bit nervous in the beginning, but you couldn't see it. It was really, really good. Apologies about the screen being frozen and then going through all the slides, but it has been recorded, so people will be able to listen to your presentation, and they'll have a copy of the presentation as well. So they will have the full presentation issued to them. So once again, thank you all, and thank you to my colleague in the background as well, to Sarah. Like we said initially, we will have a short survey at the end of this, so if you could complete that for us, it just lets us know to give some feedback to the speakers and to let us know what webinars you'd like to hear in the future. So thank you everyone, stay safe. The webinar is now ended. Bye for now.